The man who blew the whistle on Cambridge Analytica's misuse of Facebook users' personal data says social media platforms are no longer safe. Christopher Wylie made those comments to the Senate Judiciary Committee Wednesday. Wylie is the former director of research for the London-based data firm. He was among the first to go public with reports of how Cambridge Analytica misused the personal data of more than 87 million Facebook users. Here is some of what he told senators.
Cambridge Analytica is the canary in the coal mine. We must address the digital echo chambers that are being exploited to algorithmically segregate American society. Online communities should unite us and not divide us. The Cambridge Analytica scandal has exposed that social platforms are no longer safe for users. These platforms are a critical part of American cyberspace and are in desperate need of protection and oversight. There is a new game being played, and that the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness need to be defended from those who might undermine them using new technologies, whether they are corporations, whether they are nations, or whether they are non-state actors.
Joining me now is Dan Patterson. He is a senior writer at Tech Republic. Dan, thanks so much for being with us. Christopher Wylie said that data security should be considered a national security issue. What are some of the dangers he outlined?
Well, some of the dangers of data security or data insecurity is the weaponization of data. And we're seeing this right now. As the New York Times reported this morning, we see in Sri Lanka, or we look at the Rohingya crisis, data can be weaponized. And in fact, the Facebook platform was used to weaponize data that led to the loss of life, mass loss of life in those regions.
Absolutely. Now, Wylie also pointed out that it's important for people to recognize the amount of power these tech companies have over people's personal data. What does he say he recommends should be done to secure people's personal information?
Well, there are a number of things that we can do to lock down our personal information. But honestly, according to Wylie and others, we now live in a hegemony. We are giving our information in an asymmetric form to a few big data companies. He also said that same thing that we've said here many times before, data is like oil. It is the machinery, it is the power that drives the new economy.
Absolutely. Now, Wylie also said that when he was working at Cambridge Analytica, the relationship that he noted between Cambridge Analytica and certain Russian entities gave him pause and was really one of the reasons that he left. What did he say about that relationship? What did we learn?
Well, there is no doubt that foreign actors, particularly the Russians, are involved in cognitive hacking, that is, the exploitation of data to segment populations. One thing Wylie said really stuck out to me, and that is, if you create segments of populations and those populations then stop receiving news from the mainstream media, they are effectively dropped out of the electorate if they choose to vote or not participate in a system. He said something that was really fascinating, and that was that it's so much easier to demobilize people than it is to mobilize people. So if you remember all of the rallies that we saw in previous elections with big, excited crowds, it's way easier to keep people from going to the polls than it is to excite them, to get them to vote.
That is interesting and so scary for a democracy, of course. Now, what else did Wylie say about Steve Bannon, of course, former Trump advisor and former vice president of Cambridge Analytica? What was the role he played there?
Well, he said that Steve Bannon, who we know that Bannon is a very thoughtful person, we know that he's a student of history, and we know that Steve Bannon reads. Wylie said that Bannon wanted to weaponize data in forms that would allow him to perform cultural warfare. Those are really hard words to hear and really hard words to say, but we can look at the language that the president used in his campaign rallies, and we can look at the same language, the same keywords Wylie said were identified in Cambridge Analytica's survey of data.
Now, what can we infer from the news that CBS News has confirmed that the White House has eliminated the role of cybersecurity coordinator? Why eliminate a role that seems to be more important now than ever?
Well, we can only speculate as to why the White House chose to do this, but what this will do, in effect, is remove the direct line of communication from the intelligence community to the executive branch. And this is important because there is so much information in cyber war that has to be communicated in a very fast fashion from the intelligence community up to the executive, and decisions have to be made very quickly. Let me give you an example. If we see a cyber attack that targets, say, Atlanta with ransomware, you don't need to hack an election booth in order to keep the polls down. All you have to do is target critical infrastructure like transportation,
water. If you can't get to the polls, you can't vote.
That's exactly right. So in order to respond to that, we need to have threat coordinators that are talking openly with the National Security Council as well as the NSA and the CIA.
So can we assume then that this position will be replaced by something comparable?
I don't know that that's a fair assumption right now. It's something that could be considered in the future, but right now this role is gone, and this is in keeping with John Bolton's history in siloing the executive.
Very interesting. Dan Patterson, thank you so much for coming to see us today.
Great to be here.